The data showed the impossibility. Velocities that defied the laws of physics, turns that defied the capabilities of any aircraft to survive. Several scrambled alerts. Untrackable. And after we made a report, the sightings were gone. All of them. I have observed the impossibility for the last 11 years in my own Navy, that these events have not happened. But I was on board the USS Omaha in the California area. I have witnessed these events personally, tracked them through every sensor we possessed, changed my whole understanding of what's been possible. Alexander Ramirez, and this is me. Senior Chief Operations Specialist, U.S. Navy. 23 years service. The reason why I'm recounting this is because silence has never and does not now keep anyone safe, and it is past time for the truth to emerge. On the 14th of July, 2019, the USS Omaha, an Independence-class littoral combat ship, encountered unknown objects with echolocation of approximately 60 nautical miles from San Diego, California. I was working night duty as Senior Operations Specialist. During the 4-hour period that I witnessed, the incident was captured through thermal imaging, radar, and multi-video cameras. The Navy has that evidence. They classified it. They told us never to discuss it. They made the reports disappear. I'm done staying silent. Let me start with context. The USS Omaha was conducting routine operations in our designated exercise area. It was a clear night, calm seas, excellent visibility. We had a full Combat Information Center watch team. Myself as Senior Operations Specialist, 2 junior OSs, a fire controlman, and our Tactical Action Officer. Around 2100 hours, our surface search radar started picking up contacts. Multiple returns, about 15 total, all airborne, moving in formation about 20,000 feet up. Not unusual. We operate off the California coast. Commercial air traffic is constant. Military exercises are frequent. We track hundreds of aircraft per day. But these contacts were behaving strangely. First, their speed was inconsistent. One moment they'd be doing 200 knots, the next 600 knots, then back to 150. Civilian aircraft don't do that. Even military jets maintain consistent airspeeds during most maneuvers. Second, their altitude was changing rapidly without the gradual transitions you'd expect from conventional aircraft. They'd be at 20,000 feet, then drop to 5,000 in seconds, then climb back to 15,000. "Radar's acting up," Petty Officer Williams said. "These tracks are jumping all over the scope." I checked the system diagnostics. Everything was green. Radar was functioning normally, which meant the contacts themselves were doing things that made no sense. "Switch to narrow beam," I ordered. "Let's get better resolution on these targets." We refined our tracking. The contacts became clearer. Definitely airborne objects, definitely moving. But the movement patterns were impossible for conventional aircraft. Around 21:30, our thermal imaging system picked them up. Now we had visual confirmation. Not just radar returns, but actual heat signatures. "Chief, you need to see this," Petty Officer Mitchell called from the FLIR station. I moved to his console. The thermal display showed multiple objects appearing as bright spots against the cool ocean background. They were roughly spherical, about the size of a small car based on the thermal bloom. And they were moving in ways I'd never seen before. They'd hover in place for 30 seconds, then accelerate to hundreds of knots instantly. No transition, no gradual buildup of speed, just stationary to moving, like flipping a switch. "What are we looking at?" the TAO asked, leaning over my shoulder. "Unknown, sir. Whatever they are, they're not following normal flight characteristics." We tracked them for the next 2 hours. During that time, the objects performed maneuvers that violated everything I knew about aerospace physics. 90-degree turns at 600 knots with no decrease in speed. vertical ascents from sea level to 15,000 feet in under 5 seconds. Descents that should have resulted in impact, but instead ended with the objects hovering motionless just above the water. Around 2300 hours, things got even stranger. One of the objects descended until it was just above the ocean surface, maybe 30 feet up. It hovered there for about 2 minutes, then it dropped into the water. Not crashed, not impacted. It descended smoothly and entered the water without any splash or disturbance we could detect. "Splash track," Williams called out. "One contact entered the water at..." He gave the coordinates. "Did it crash?" the TAO asked. "Negative, sir. It descended in a controlled manner, looked deliberate. We immediately went to active sonar. If something went into the water, we needed to track it. Our sonar operator, sonar technician Harris, started pinging. 'Contact,' he called out. 'Submerged track, depth approximately 100 feet, speed 70 knots. 70 knots underwater. For context, our submarines max out around 35 knots when pushing their limits. Torpedoes can hit 50, 60 knots. But a submerged object moving at 70 knots, maintaining that speed for minutes at a time? Impossible. Classification? I asked. Harris shook his head. Unknown. Doesn't match any known submarine signature. Doesn't match any torpedo profile. It's just moving. We tracked it for 20 minutes. It maintained course and speed, descended to 200 feet, then 300, going deeper than our sonar could effectively track in those conditions. Then, it was gone. Lost contact. Just vanished from our sensors. Meanwhile, the airborne objects continued their impossible maneuvers. More of them descended to the surface. Some appeared to enter the water like the first one. Others hovered just above the waves. By midnight, we tracked over 40 separate objects. Some were clearly the same contacts maneuvering repeatedly. Others were new arrivals. They seemed to be operating in coordinated groups, moving in formation, responding to each other's movements. Should we report this up the chain? The TAO asked. Standard procedure for unknown contacts is immediate reporting. But standard procedure doesn't cover objects that violate physics. We were watching something that shouldn't exist, perform maneuvers that shouldn't be possible. Yes, sir, I said. This needs to go up. The TAO made the call. Within minutes, we had senior leadership on the line. Within an hour, we were ordered to increase monitoring, record everything, maintain logs of all contacts and movements, which we did. For the next 3 hours, we tracked these objects. We documented dozens of impossible maneuvers. We recorded thermal footage. We captured radar tracks. We maintained detailed logs of every observation. Around 0300, the contacts began departing. They ascended to high altitude, moved out to sea at incredible speeds, and disappeared from our sensors. By 0330, our screens were clear. Whatever they were gone. The sun came up on a normal Pacific morning. Calm seas, clear skies, no indication that anything unusual had happened, except for the 4 hours of sensor data we'd collected, documenting objects that officially don't exist. Before I continue, I want to acknowledge something. There are hundreds of Navy personnel who've witnessed similar encounters, seen things on radar, on thermal, on visual that can't be explained. If you've served at sea, if you understand what I'm describing, please subscribe to this channel. We're building a community where these observations can finally be discussed openly. Daily uploads honoring the truth of military service. The morning after the encounter, our commanding officer called a meeting. Every watchstander who'd been on duty, every person who'd seen the sensor data, about 15 people total. What happened last night, the CO said, is classified. You will not discuss it with anyone outside this room. You will not mention it to other crew members. You will submit your logs and sensor recordings to me directly. They will be forwarded up the chain of command. Sir, I asked, what were those objects? Unknown at this time. That's why this is classified. Until we determine what we encountered, all information about the incident is need to know only. We submitted everything. Radar logs, thermal recordings, sonar tracks, written statements from every watchstander. 4 hours of documented evidence of objects performing impossible maneuvers. 3 days later, our commanding officer called me to his stateroom. Chief Ramirez, he said, you need to know that the incident reports have been forwarded to higher authority. You'll likely be contacted for additional interviews. Continue to maintain operational security about what you observed. Yes, sir. What's the official explanation? He looked uncomfortable. There isn't one yet, that's the problem. Over the next few weeks, I was indeed interviewed. 3 separate times. First by someone from our own task force, then by personnel from naval intelligence. Finally by representatives from what they said was a special UAP task force within the Office of Naval Intelligence. Each interview was the same pattern. Describe exactly what I saw, walk through the sensor data, confirm the timeline. They had copies of all our recordings, all our logs. They knew what happened. They weren't trying to establish facts. They were trying to control the narrative, maybe? Assess how much we knew? I wasn't sure. The final interviewer, a civilian contractor working with ONI, asked me a question that stuck with me. Senior Chief, in your 20 years of experience as an operations specialist, have you ever seen anything like what you observed on July 14th? Never. Do you have any explanation for what these objects were or how they achieved the movements you described? No. Based on my training and experience, what those objects did should be impossible. He nodded, made a note, then said, that assessment is consistent with other witness statements. Thank you for your cooperation. Remember, this incident remains classified. That was September 2019. I never heard anything official after that. But the story didn't end there. In 2020, the Navy officially acknowledged the existence of UAP encounters. They released 3 videos, FLIR, GIMBAL, and GOFAST, showing objects performing maneuvers similar to what we'd witnessed. The footage came from F-18 Super Hornet pilots operating off the East Coast. I watched those videos and immediately recognized the movement patterns. The impossible acceleration, the lack of visible propulsion, the thermal signatures. Those pilots had seen the same thing we saw. In 2021, the Pentagon released a preliminary UAP assessment to Congress. They acknowledged 143 encounters between 2004 and 2021. Admitted that most remained unexplained, confirmed that the objects demonstrated unusual flight characteristics. I thought maybe our incident would be included in that assessment. Maybe the evidence we'd collected would contribute to understanding these phenomena. But when I tried to access our own records, the logs we'd submitted, the sensor data we'd recorded, I found they'd been classified at a level above my clearance. Even though I'd witnessed the events, even though I'd written the reports, I no longer had access to the documentation of what I'd personally observed. The Navy had taken our evidence and made it disappear. In 2023, I started connecting with other Navy personnel who'd had similar experiences. Turns out the USS Omaha encounter wasn't unique. It wasn't even the only incident involving our ship. Other crew members, on different watch rotations, reported tracking similar objects in the months before and after our encounter. And it wasn't just the Omaha. Multiple ships in our strike group reported encounters. The USS Russell, the USS Rafael Peralta, the USS Paul Hamilton. All of them had tracked similar objects. All of them had submitted reports. All of them had been told to classify the incidents and stay silent. I connected with a former operations specialist from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. She'd been part of the East Coast encounters that resulted in the famous FLIR video. Her story was nearly identical to mine. Objects performing impossible maneuvers, multiple sensor systems confirming the observations, reports submitted and then classified. They made us feel crazy, she told me, like we'd imagined it, like the sensors were malfunctioning, but we saw it. Multiple ships, multiple air crews, dozens of witnesses. It was real. Another contact was a sonar technician from a Los Angeles-class submarine. He'd tracked submerged objects moving at speeds that exceeded anything in known submarine technology. Underwater contacts that appeared to be related to the airborne UAPs we'd all observed. We nicknamed them fast movers, he said, because they'd appear on sonar, accelerate to speeds we couldn't maintain tracking on, then vanish. We submitted detailed reports, never heard back, never got any explanation. The pattern was consistent across all these encounters. 1. Multiple witnesses, multiple sensor systems. 2. Objects performing maneuvers that violated known physics. 3. Official reports submitted through proper channels. 4. Immediate classification and silence. 5. No feedback, no explanation, no acknowledgement. The Navy knew. They'd known for years. They had mountains of evidence from some of the most sophisticated sensor systems on the planet, operated by highly trained personnel. And they'd chosen to classify it all rather than acknowledge what was happening. In 2024, Congress established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, to investigate UAP sightings. They called for military personnel to come forward with their experiences. They promised protection for whistleblowers. They claimed to want transparency. I considered coming forward officially, filing a report with AARO, providing my testimony about the Omaha encounter. But I talked to others who had. Several Navy pilots who'd reported their UAP encounters to AARO. They described a frustrating process where their detailed accounts seemed to disappear into a bureaucratic black hole. No follow-up, no investigation. Their sensor data was requested, then never referenced again in any official assessment. One pilot told me, "They made me feel like they were humoring me, like they were checking a box by taking my statement, but had no intention of actually investigating." That's when I understood. AARO wasn't about disclosure. It was about controlled management. Give people a channel to report so they feel heard, then carefully filter what actually gets acknowledged. The evidence from the Omaha remains classified. The footage we captured, the radar tracks, the sonar recordings, all of it locked away, inaccessible even to those of us who created it. Why? What's being protected? These objects were operating in U.S. territorial waters. They were demonstrating technology that far exceeds our capabilities. If they're foreign adversaries, China, Russia, or anyone else, that's a massive national security threat that the American people need to know about. If there's something else, non-human intelligence, extra-dimensional, or any other exotic explanation, that's perhaps even more significant and definitely something the public has a right to know. Instead, silence, classification, denial. The official Navy position, when pressed, is that these incidents are being investigated, that they take all UAP reports seriously, that they're committed to understanding these phenomena. But I know what actually happens. Reports get classified. Witnesses get told to stay silent. Evidence gets locked away. And years pass with no acknowledgement, no investigation, no transparency. I'm coming forward now because I'm retired. I'm no longer subject to military discipline. I'm no longer dependent on my clearance for my livelihood. I can speak without fear of career repercussions, but I shouldn't have to wait until retirement to tell the truth about what I witnessed while serving my country. The objects we encountered off the coast of California in July 2019 were real. They demonstrated capabilities that our most advanced technology can't match. They operated with apparent impunity in U.S. territorial waters, and the Navy has evidence of all of it. What are they hiding? And more importantly, why? Let me get specific about what those objects did, because the details matter. The thermal imaging showed objects about 6 feet in diameter, roughly spherical, with no visible means of propulsion. No jet exhaust, no rotor wash, no plasma trail that you'd expect from hypersonic movement. Just smooth, metallic-looking surfaces that glowed consistently on thermal. The speeds they achieved were documented on radar. We tracked them accelerating from hovering to 600-plus knots in under 2 seconds. For reference, the fastest military jets require several seconds and significant space to achieve those speeds. These objects did it instantly, with no apparent propulsion system. The altitude changes were equally impossible. We watched on radar as an object dropped from 15,000 feet to sea level in approximately 3 seconds. It should have crashed, should have created a massive impact signature. Instead, it leveled off at 30 feet above the water and began hovering. The physics of that deceleration is staggering. The G-forces should have ripped apart any conventional aircraft. Any pilot inside would have been killed instantly. But these objects performed such maneuvers repeatedly, almost casually. The transmedium capability, moving from air to water, was perhaps the most unsettling aspect. One of the objects descended slowly to the water surface, creating what looked like a controlled entry. No splash, no impact. It just transitioned from one medium to another. Then it appeared on sonar, traveling at 70 knots at a depth of 100 feet. No turbulence, no cavitation bubble that you'd expect from something moving that fast underwater, just smooth, impossible movement. Our sonar technician, Harris, pulled me aside after the encounter. "Chief," he said, "I've been tracking submarines for 12 years. I know what every platform in the world sounds like, how they move, what their signatures are. That thing I tracked? It doesn't match anything. Not Russian, not Chinese, not one of ours. It's not even close to anything I've seen." "Could it be some kind of new technology?" I asked. "If it is, it's technology that rewrites physics. And whoever has it is decades ahead of anything we have." That conversation haunted me. Because if Harris was right, and his 12 years of experience suggested he was, then we'd encountered something that represented either the most significant technological leap in human history or something non-human. And the Navy classified it. In the years since, I've read every public report on UAPs I could find. The Pentagon assessments, congressional testimonies, scientific papers analyzing the available data. And I keep seeing the same pattern. The official reports acknowledge the encounters happened. They acknowledge the objects demonstrated unusual characteristics. But then they stop short of drawing any conclusions. They say the data is insufficient. They say more investigation is needed. They classify the actual evidence. It's maddening, because I personally witnessed that the data isn't insufficient. We had thermal imaging, radar tracks, sonar recordings, visual observations from trained personnel, multiple sensor systems confirming the same impossible behaviors. The data was excellent, comprehensive, undeniable. So why does the official assessment claim insufficient data? Because acknowledging what the data shows would require admitting something uncomfortable. Either we're facing a massive intelligence failure, foreign adversaries have developed technology that makes our defenses obsolete, or we're dealing with something beyond current human capabilities entirely. Neither option is politically palatable. So instead, classify the evidence, minimize the significance, claim ongoing investigation, and hope public interest fades. But it's not fading. If anything, it's growing. In January 2026, I learned about a major UAP press conference being organized in Washington, D.C. Whistleblowers, witnesses, researchers, all coming together to share evidence and testimony. I'm planning to attend, to add my voice to the others demanding transparency. Because this isn't just about satisfying curiosity about UFOs. This is about accountability, about truth, about whether our military and intelligence agencies can be trusted to be honest with the American people about significant national security matters. The USS Omaha encounter wasn't some vague sighting. It wasn't misidentified Venus or a weather balloon. It was a documented multi-hour encounter with objects demonstrating technology beyond our capabilities, witnessed by trained military personnel using sophisticated sensor systems. And it's been buried for more than 6 years. How many other encounters have been similarly buried? How much evidence exists that we can't access? How long has this been going on? I've talked to Navy veterans who served in the 1960s who describe similar encounters. Pilots from the 70s and 80s with stories of objects performing impossible maneuvers. Surface warfare officers from the 90s tracking unknown contacts. This has been happening for decades. Generations of military personnel have witnessed these phenomena. And generations of classification have kept it hidden from public knowledge. The justification is always national security. But whose security is being protected? Not the American people, who are being kept ignorant of potential threats or paradigm-shifting phenomena occurring in their own airspace and territorial waters. The security being protected is institutional. The security of bureaucracies that don't want to admit they've been lying for 70 years. The security of classification systems that have become tools for political convenience rather than genuine protection of sensitive information. When I joined the Navy in 1996, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. That oath included a commitment to truth, to integrity, to serving the American people. By staying silent about the USS Omaha encounter, I've been violating that oath. Not because I shared classified information I shouldn't have. I'm being careful not to reveal operational details that could compromise legitimate national security. But because I've allowed institutional pressure to silence me about something the American people have a right to know. So let me state it clearly. On July 14, 2019, the USS Omaha encountered multiple objects off the California coast that demonstrated technological capabilities beyond anything in the known military inventory of any nation. These objects were tracked on radar, thermal imaging, and sonar. They performed maneuvers that violate our understanding of physics. They operated with apparent impunity in U.S. territorial waters. The Navy has detailed documentation of all of this: sensor recordings, logs, witness statements, scientific quality data that could advance our understanding of these phenomena. And they've classified it all, made it disappear, told everyone involved to stay quiet. That's not protecting national security. That's protecting a cover-up. And I'm done being part of it. The Navy has thousands of personnel who've witnessed these encounters, sailors, pilots, officers who've seen things they can't explain, tracked objects that shouldn't exist. If this story resonates with you, if you've had similar experiences or know someone who has, please subscribe. We're building a community where military truth can finally be told. Daily uploads, honoring the reality of service and the courage to speak up. Since announcing my intention to speak publicly about the Omaha encounter, I've received interesting responses. Some former Navy colleagues have reached out in support. It's about time someone spoke up. I saw similar things and never reported them because I didn't want to deal with the classification hassle. Others have been more cautious. Be careful, Chief. You're still bound by your security clearances, even retired. Make sure you're not violating classified protocols. I've been careful. I've reviewed my retirement paperwork, consulted with attorneys who specialize in whistleblower protections, ensured that what I'm sharing is based on my personal observations and doesn't reveal classified operational procedures or capabilities. But the fact that I need lawyers just to talk about what I saw, that's part of the problem. The classification system has been weaponized to silence witnesses, to prevent accountability, to maintain secrecy that serves no legitimate security purpose. The most interesting response came from an active duty officer currently serving on a West Coast-based ship. He couldn't identify himself, but he sent me a message through encrypted channels. We're still seeing them, same type of encounters you described, same impossible maneuvers, same transmedium capabilities. We're told to log them, classify them, and forget them. Nothing has changed, except now there are more encounters than ever. More encounters than ever. That's significant. These phenomena aren't decreasing. They're not going away. They're becoming more frequent. And the Navy is still classifying them, still ordering silence, still maintaining the same cover-up that's been in place for decades. Why? What's the end game? You can't maintain classification forever. Eventually, the truth emerges. Eventually, enough witnesses come forward that the official story falls apart. We're reaching that point now. The Pentagon has acknowledged UAPs. Congress is holding hearings. Legislation has been passed requiring transparency. The old mechanisms of total denial are no longer working. But the institutional resistance remains. The classification system remains. The pressure on witnesses to stay silent remains. I'm speaking out because someone has to break that cycle. Someone has to stand up and say, I was there. I saw it. Here's what happened. And the official explanation is insufficient. I'm willing to testify under oath. I'm willing to submit to any investigation. I'm willing to face whatever consequences come from telling the truth. Because the alternative, continued silence, continued cover-up, continued denial of something that our own censors documented, is unacceptable. The objects we encountered in July 2019 were real. They demonstrated capabilities that should be impossible. They operated freely in an area where we supposedly have complete situational awareness and control. And someone, somewhere, knows more than they're telling. That's the mystery that needs to be solved. Not just what these objects are, but why their existence has been hidden from the American people for so long. I don't have those answers. I'm just an operations specialist who watched these things on radar and thermal imaging for 4 hours one night in 2019. But I know what I saw. I know what our sensors recorded. I know the truth has been classified and buried, and I'm no longer willing to be silent about it. There are more stories like this, more encounters, more witnesses, more evidence locked away in classified files. But each person who speaks up makes it harder to maintain the silence. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story from military service, another truth that needs to be told, another example of the courage and dedication of the men and women who serve. Until then, remember, truth matters, transparency matters, and the service members who put their careers on the line to tell these stories deserve to be heard. The decision to go public wasn't easy. I spent months debating it, consulting with lawyers about my security clearance obligations, talking with my family about the potential consequences, weighing the personal cost against the importance of transparency. My wife was supportive, but cautious. "You have nothing to gain from this," she said. "Your pension is secure. Your career is over. Why risk everything by speaking out?" "Because it's the right thing to do," I told her. "Because other people are still experiencing these encounters and they're being silenced just like I was. Because the Navy has evidence that the American people deserve to know about." She squeezed my hand. "Then do it. But be careful." I reached out to journalists who'd covered UAP stories seriously. Not the sensationalist outlets looking for clickbait, but reporters who understood the significance of military witness testimony and the complexity of the disclosure issue. One journalist, Sarah Martinez from a major national news outlet, took particular interest in my case. She spent weeks verifying my service record, tracking down other witnesses from the Omaha, and reviewing public documentation about Navy UAP encounters. "Your story is credible," she told me. "You have the credentials, the expertise, and corroborating witnesses. But I need to be honest with you. The Navy is going to push back. They're going to question your memory, suggest the sensors malfunctioned, imply that you're seeking attention. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been prepared for 12 years, I said. "They can question all they want. The evidence exists. Multiple sensor systems, multiple trained observers, documented logs. The truth is on my side." The story ran in early January 2026. Front page of the national news site. Headline: "Former Navy Operations Specialist, we tracked UAPs for hours off California coast. The Navy classified everything." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, my email inbox was flooded. Some messages were supportive, other military personnel sharing similar experiences, civilians thanking me for speaking out, researchers asking for additional details. Others were hostile, accusations of seeking fame, suggestions I'd fabricated the story, threats for betraying my oath of service. The Navy's official response came 24 hours later. A carefully worded statement that didn't actually address the specifics of my account. "The U.S. Navy takes all reports of unidentified phenomena seriously. We have established protocols for reporting and investigating such incidents. We cannot comment on specific operational details or individual personnel matters. All UAP reports are handled through appropriate classified channels." Translation: "We're not denying it happened, but we're not confirming it either. And we're definitely not releasing the evidence." That statement told me everything I needed to know. They weren't attacking my credibility. They weren't calling me a liar. They were just not talking about it. The same institutional silence that's been maintained for 70 years, but the public conversation had shifted. My story, combined with the dozens of other witness accounts that had emerged over the previous few years, was making it harder for the Navy to maintain the fiction that these encounters were rare or insignificant. Congressional representatives took notice. Within a week, I received a call from a staffer for a senator on the Armed Services Committee. They wanted me to provide testimony at a closed-door briefing. Not a public hearing, not yet, but an opportunity to share my observations with lawmakers who had oversight authority over the Navy. I agreed. In late January, I flew to Washington and spent 3 hours in a secure facility talking to a group of senators and their cleared staff members. I walked them through the Omaha encounter in detail, described the impossible movements, explained why the sensor data proved these weren't conventional aircraft or drones, answered their questions about my training, my experience, and my confidence in what I'd observed. One senator asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Senior Chief, in your professional opinion, what were those objects?" "Senator, I can tell you what they weren't. They weren't conventional aircraft. They weren't drones. They weren't weather phenomena or optical illusions. They demonstrated technology that exceeds anything in the known military inventory of any nation. Beyond that, I can't speculate about their origin. I can only describe what I observed and what our sensors recorded." "And the Navy classified all that evidence?" "Yes, sir. Every piece of it." "Why do you think they did that?" I chose my words carefully, because acknowledging the full scope of these encounters would require admitting things the Navy isn't ready to admit. Either that we're facing a significant intelligence failure, unknown actors are operating advanced technology in our waters with impunity, or that these phenomena represent something beyond current human capabilities. Neither option is comfortable for the institutional Navy to acknowledge. After the briefing, the senator's staffer pulled me aside. "That was powerful testimony. We're going to push for the declassification of some of this evidence. The American people have a right to know what's happening in their territorial waters." I appreciated the sentiment, but I'd heard similar promises before. The machinery of classification is powerful. Breaking through it requires sustained pressure, political will, and bureaucratic courage. I wasn't holding my breath. Meanwhile, the connections with other Navy personnel continued to grow. I became part of a network of current and former sailors who'd witnessed similar phenomena. We shared information, compared observations, and supported each other in dealing with the stigma and institutional pressure. One active-duty operations specialist reached out through encrypted channels. He couldn't use his real name. Doing so would risk his career, but he wanted me to know that encounters like the one I'd experienced were ongoing. "We see them regularly now," he told me. "Off the coast of California, Virginia, the Gulf of Mexico. The patterns are consistent with what you described. Transmedium capability, impossible speeds, no visible propulsion. And we're still being told to classify everything and stay quiet about it." "How many ships have reported encounters?" "I can't give you exact numbers, but it's not isolated incidents anymore. It's systematic. Multiple strike groups, multiple operational areas. This is happening across the fleet." That information was chilling. If these encounters were as frequent as he suggested, the Navy was sitting on a massive amount of evidence, potentially thousands of hours of sensor data, hundreds of witness accounts, comprehensive documentation of a phenomenon that officially rarely occurs and is under investigation. The gap between official statements and operational reality had never been wider. In February 2026, another development shifted the landscape. A former Navy pilot filed a formal complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General, alleging retaliation for reporting UAP encounters. His case detailed threats to his career, forced psychological evaluations, and attempts to discredit his observations, despite having gun camera footage and radar data supporting his account. The Inspector General investigation was ongoing, but the fact that it existed represented progress. Witnesses were being taken seriously at levels that could actually enforce accountability. The walls of silence were showing cracks. I connected with this pilot. We compared experiences. The retaliation patterns were identical. The classification responses were identical. The institutional denial was identical. Separated by different ships, different coasts, different years, we'd faced the exact same cover-up machinery. "They have a playbook," he told me. "Step 1, classify the evidence. Step 2, question the witness's credibility. Step 3, threaten career consequences. Step 4, hope everyone stays quiet." It's been working for decades because witnesses were isolated, but now we're connecting. We're comparing notes. We're realizing this is systematic, not random. "What do you think it will take to break through?" I asked. "Critical mass. Enough witnesses speaking out that they can't discredit all of us. Enough evidence in the public domain that the official denials become obviously false. Enough political pressure that maintaining the cover-up becomes more costly than acknowledging the truth." We weren't there yet, but we were getting closer. My own family life had been impacted by going public. My adult children, both Navy veterans themselves, had mixed feelings about my decision. My son supported it completely. "You're doing the right thing, Dad. Someone has to speak up." My daughter was more worried about the consequences. "I'm proud of you, but I'm also concerned about what this might cost you." The cost so far had been manageable. Some relationships strained, some opportunities closed, but nothing catastrophic. My pension was secure. They couldn't touch that without proving I'd violated specific laws, which I hadn't. My clearance was under review, but I'd been careful not to disclose classified operational procedures, only my personal observations. The bigger question was whether speaking out would actually matter. Would it lead to meaningful change? Or would it just be another voice in a crowded field, eventually forgotten when the news cycle moved on? I didn't have answers to those questions. I could only control my own actions, tell my truth, support other witnesses, keep pushing for transparency, and hope that eventually the weight of evidence would become too heavy for the institutional denial to support. One evening in March, I sat down with my grandchildren, ages 12 and 14, and tried to explain what Grandpa had seen and why it mattered. It was a strange conversation. How do you explain UAPs to kids who've grown up with science fiction and video games, where impossible technology is entertainment? "Grandpa, do you think they're aliens?" my grandson asked. "I don't know, buddy. I can tell you they were real. I can tell you they moved in ways that our technology can't match, but where they came from, that's the big question nobody can answer yet. Why won't the Navy tell everyone what they know? Out of the mouths of children. The question adults complicate with talk of national security and operational security and classification protocols. But stripped to its essence, why won't they just tell the truth? That's what I'm trying to help change," I told him. "By speaking up, by sharing what I saw, by encouraging other people who've had similar experiences to come forward. Truth matters, and sometimes you have to fight for it." My granddaughter, more skeptical, asked, "But Grandpa, if you saw something amazing, why did it take you so long to talk about it?" Fair question. "Because I was scared. Scared I'd lose my job. Scared people wouldn't believe me. Scared the military would retaliate. It took me years to realize that staying quiet was protecting a lie. And I decided I'd rather face the consequences of telling the truth than keep carrying the burden of silence." Those conversations with my grandchildren crystallized something for me. This wasn't just about UAPs or government transparency or Navy policy. It was about modeling integrity, about showing the next generation that truth matters more than convenience, that speaking up is worth the personal cost. The months following my public statement brought a steady stream of media requests, research inquiries, and witness contacts. I became an unofficial clearinghouse for Navy UAP sightings, people reaching out to share their experiences, seeking validation, connecting with others who'd witnessed similar phenomena. The patterns that emerged were striking. The encounters weren't random. They clustered around certain locations: California coast, Virginia coast, the Persian Gulf. They occurred during specific types of operations: carrier strike group exercises, weapons testing, submarine operations. And they demonstrated consistent capabilities: transmedium travel, extreme acceleration, hovering, advanced sensors. Whatever these objects were, they showed particular interest in our most advanced military capabilities. That fact alone suggested intelligence, purpose, strategy. And the Navy knew all of this, had known for years, had mountains of data documenting it, and had chosen to classify it all rather than acknowledge the implications. That choice, to hide rather than investigate transparently, may be the greatest failure in this entire saga. Science advances through open inquiry, peer review, collaborative research. By classifying this evidence, the Navy has ensured that the phenomena can't be properly studied, can't be understood, can't be addressed if they do represent a threat. The cover-up isn't protecting national security, it's preventing it.